We are talking Ghost Crew from 2022, also known as LINGER. And this one is directed by Laurie Brewster and stars Tom Staunton, who also wrote the movie, and Megan Tremthick. And there's a very low budget hybrid found footage movie about paranormal investigators. So hybrid found footage movie, I would say it's like 2/3 in the style of found footage, with the other third being a kind of traditionally filmed style movie. And it initially follows a two-man crew that do kind of paranormal investigations on various different things. They're not having much luck with it. They have this kind of show that is threatening to be cancelled, etc. And one day they just stumble across this young woman called Sandy, and she seems a little bit sort of disorientated, and for kind of some reason they sort of decide that they want to kind of like hang around with her and sort of almost be a little bit obsessed with her, to be honest. And she ends up kind of joining the crew, and they are investigating this kind of burnt down church, or no, it's a burnt down hospital, sorry, that had an unsolved murder years before. And it kind of follows this investigation, interviewing various different people and trying to uncover what has happened. What has happened, you will have to watch the movie and find out. So let us discuss Ghost Crew, aka LINGER. I've actually wanting to see this one for a little while now. I do quite enjoy a kind of haunted hospital, found footage style movie. This one is less about the visceral scares. This is nothing like kind of Grave Encounters. This is a very low budget movie, more about the actual investigation, I would say. So on the plus side, yeah, it's kind of probably a movie which focuses more on the investigation, the evidence building, the kind of the interviewing, the you know, following the lead. So in that respect, you do feel these are genuine investigators, because they do investigate the kind of the clues and where it's kind of going and who's involved and things like this. The vast majority of this movie is our ghost crew interviewing various people and kind of getting to the kind of the next clue or the next kind of person that they're interviewing. So that's the sort of the bulk of the running time. That might not sound all that interesting, but I do feel, at least it does feel like, you know, this is kind of almost like a genuine investigation to a degree. It's a case that the police had given up on, things like this. So in a way, I kind of quite like that more grounded element to it. Tom Staunton, who is the writer and main actor here, makes for kind of quite an affable, somewhat kind of geeky, highly strung kind of lead character who's a little bit sort of comedic. He's quite often clumsy and makes a fool of himself, you know, he's kind of talking to people, but he still takes his job very seriously and everything like that. So it is played straight, but there are some sort of comedic elements, and he's quite a memorable character, I have to say. And there are the Megan Tremthick, who plays Sandy, which is this kind of young woman who ends up kind of joining the crew again. It's such a small cast, and these guys are on screen like pretty much, you know, 75 to 80% of the time. You kind of feel like you sort of do root for these characters to a sort of certain degree. The mystery is surprisingly complex to a degree. There's a lot of peeling back layers, and you know, who's the next clue reveals, and then obviously this leads to someone else who might have information. So the kind of the bulk of the story, and we're going to talk about the negatives, is basically just interviewing people. But nonetheless, I do think it is you know, almost an interesting case where you do feel like there is a progression in the kind of the investigation, sort of, so to speak. It's a very, very low budget movie. There's not really any type of big VFX moment or anything like that. There's a couple of scenes which are shot to be quite spooky, and I did quite like some of the directorial choices here. For example, the differences between the footage. We have these kind of found footage sequences, which tends to be in a kind of a certain aspect ratio, and then we have a lot clearer footage which is in a different aspect ratio when we have our like scenes that aren't found footage. And you know, I quite like that. I quite like some of the kind of like the way this kind of these location shoots are kind of filmed and lit and things like that. It makes it kind of look, you can kind of see the very low budget, but they're trying to kind of get the most that they can from this. You know, and that I kind of quite liked. So, you know, if you don't mind a very kind of low tech, very talky, not much kind of frills found footage movie, then, you know, you may want to check it out. What doesn't work? Okay, so let's start with a hybrid angle first of all. I have to say I don't think a hybrid movie works, personally. The whole concept of a found footage movie is where you can kind of forget you're watching a movie and you feel like you're watching this footage that has been discovered, and you kind of buy into that sort of that kind of concept, so to speak. And so the more authentic the feel of found footage, the more sort of you are engrossed in it. So when a movie oscillates between sequences that are found footage, then has sequences that aren't, it goes, because you don't have that sort of suspension of disbelief, because the movie itself breaks that. So I don't think the concept of a hybrid movie actually works. Now, I've kind of touched upon this already. The bulk of the running time is our ghost crew interviewing someone, then interviewing someone else, then interviewing someone else. And although I did appreciate they're uncovering clues and you know, going to the next kind of lead, so to speak, it is ultimately a series of conversations and interviews. This is what this movie is, with very little actually on screen in regards to, you know, supernatural horror elements, scary scenes, nothing really like that. I mean, as we get towards the end, we do get a little bit, but not a huge amount here. It is lots of that good old phrase I like to use here on this channel, conversations in rooms, or conversations outside sometimes with this one. But that's ultimately what it is. Next thing I would say, which kind of unfortunately deflates what I've just said as well, the acting isn't particularly strong. I think some characters overact, and I think some characters can't act. You know, so we have our main characters, and we have a few kind of bit parts here and there. I won't say who's who, but generally speaking, I think the kind of a movie which relies so much on dialogue sequences, I still quite like the characters. I'm gonna say that, even though I don't think the acting was spectacular, I still did enjoy the characters. I'll give them that, but the acting wasn't particularly good. You know, it's just hammed up a little bit too much. I think to a degree, when we have our character of Tom presenting these kind of like sequences where he's talking to his audience, yes, I understand he's meant to be a little bit more animated because he's playing a kind of like a character to a degree. But it's other sequences as well and things like this. So the acting wasn't brilliant. This movie almost has a twist. Well, it does have a twist, but I've never seen a more obvious twist. You'll guess this twist within the first few minutes of the movie. I don't even know if it really, if they think they're making a twist. I mean, but they must be, because the characters in the movie aren't aware. But we as the audience member, it is particularly obvious what the kind of what's going to be this big reveal at the end. And without spoiling anything, which is going to be tough here, I would have liked to have seen maybe a little bit more of an interesting idea here. Bear in mind, this movie is called Ghost Crew, or at least that's one of the names here. I think there could have been a more interesting idea again, without spoiling anything, maybe I'll do a little bit of a spoiler thing at the end here. So let me give my rating for this one, and then I'm going to have a little bit of a post-credit scene where I'm going to have a bit of a spoiler. So my ratings for this one is a 4 out of 10. I think it's a slightly below average movie. I still kind of enjoyed it to a point, but I think it's let down by obviously a lack of budget, but I think the somewhat kind of repetitive nature of just a whole lots of conversations in rooms, evidence which just seems to turn up and be mega, it just happens to kind of fall into their laps. Dodgy acting leads me to a 4 out of 10. So there it is, 4 out of 10. So, spoiler. So, yes, Megan Tremsick's character, Sandy, turns out to be a ghost. Like, super obvious, right from the get-go. Would have been more interesting and more original had they maybe found out she was a ghost halfway through this movie, but then she still is on the team. And then you genuinely do have a ghost crew. And then she actually helps them go and, as a ghost, go and investigate, paranormal activity. That would have been a bit more of an interesting and an original idea, I personally would say. And I didn't really understand. Right, so when we first meet the character of Sandy, I kind of guessed that she was going to be a ghost pretty much straight away, because she's like, oh, well, I have no memory. Okay, well, she's going to be a ghost. But I didn't, our characters don't know that. So I thought, why are they seemingly so obsessed with her? Why are they kind of chasing her down, taking her back to the office? I mean, she seems maybe a little confused, but a little cognitive. They're almost a bit stalkery, I have to say. Now, we know it's because the movie wants her to be a main character in this movie. That's why they're doing it. But then if you're looking at it in a reality, it actually comes across like they're being a bit creepy, I have to say. They're a little bit sort of stalkery. Which probably wasn't the intention. So anyway, yeah. Again, 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What were your thoughts? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.